Hi everyone and welcome to BrickCats. I just finished 2BricksOfficial's T-65 X-Wing model, and it is the subject of my review today. As always, if you enjoy my content, consider giving the video a like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and come back in the future for more LEGO Star Wars mock reviews. The X-Wing Starfighter, of course, formed the backbone of the Alliance Starfighter Corps through, and I imagine past, the fall of the Empire, being replaced with the newer T-70 in the Resistance First Order era. As far as iconic ships goes, the X-Wing is right up there with the Falcon, the TIE Fighter, and perhaps the Star Destroyer. I'm sure most Star Wars fans remember the first time they heard
Lock air spoils in attack position.
that. Still gives me chills from when I saw A New Hope in theaters for the first time. In my reviews, I offer my opinions on aesthetics and model features, parts issues you might want to look out for, the build experience, the model's integrity, and I offer a conclusion. If you're watching this, I assume you've bought the instructions or are interested in buying them, and I assume a basic level of familiarity with Bricklink's ordering system. Lastly, my disclaimer on this and all my mock reviews is that I only use genuine LEGO bricks, and I always purchase the instructions for myself, and for my own personal enjoyment in the hopes that my advice will make your experience more enjoyable and or less expensive. As an administrative note, I did change my goals for this section slightly to include not just how a model looks, but how any active functions work as well, if applicable. I think this was always unofficially the case, but going forward, I'm going to cover explicit play features and their functionality in this section as well. My favorite general feature about this model is the use of colors you don't often find in LEGO Star Wars builds. Bright light orange and bright light yellow, along with sand green, sand blue, tan, and even this one quarter tile here in medium nougat are used really effectively all over the model and gives the X-Wing the proper feel. Moving from front to back, I will start with the nose cone. And this is one part of the X-Wing that I feel like no one can agree on. I will say that I really like this implementation, even if I think it's a bit too short. I think maybe one plate taller would be a better shape, just because it would give it some relief from the front of the fuselage. And I also think that this bottom hinge piece here should be light bluish gray as well to give it kind of the more of the sweeping shape. The top of the front fuselage has that great color usage and has a nice connection to the nose here, and it studs in right in front of the cockpit. On either side, these angled wedge pieces, assemblies, clip in, and the red stripe runs underneath. Only a minor note, but with all the other asymmetry in this model, I was a bit surprised that these red stripes are the same on both sides. Below the front section, there is a fully retractable front landing skid, and also a working cargo bay door. And there's even some minor detailing in there. The cockpit has a nice amount of detailing with a control stick, some trans red and trans black and trans clear slopes and tiles, and some instrument panels. There's a lot of room in that cockpit. You could probably even fit a lightsaber just by sliding it back into one of these little openings. But plenty of room for a minifigure. The astromech droid sits comfortably behind the cockpit, and if you look at this from a profile view, I think the R2 unit actually has a really good position. In the movies, his head is just above the back surface here, and unfortunately, LEGO's X-Wing canopies are not the greatest as far as accuracy goes. So if this was a little flatter, like it's supposed to be, I think he'd be able to see right over it, and it would be much more accurate. Another nice feature about the astromech droid is that you don't have to fuss around with trying to fit him in perfectly in between these two slope sections. There's just a little door here that you can put him in and then close it back up. Moving back, there's some nice greebling on the top section here. And then we get to the wings and the engines. Another one of my favorite parts about this model is that all of the wings and the engine assemblies are slightly different. And it's something that's kind of hard to appreciate watching the video, But it's really awesome to look at this and notice the little differences. You can see like there's an ingot piece here, but sand blue over here. A sand green tile that's half covered up versus an ingot and some white tiles here. Tan highlighting on the engine here, not so much there. Another thing I like is that all the most visible surfaces, and by that I mean the tops of the top wings, and if you open the S-foils, the tops of the bottom wings inside there have some additional detailing, but the inside of the top wing does not, and the bottom of the bottom wings are relatively plain. So that's a practical way to keep the part count down and save on costs there. The main engine assemblies are not perfectly round, but they're close enough using these slope pieces. And it gives you some additional options for detailing because there are now studs here you can use. I definitely approve of the method used to create the T section of the engines. These don't spin out of alignment very easily, which I really appreciate. And the way the intakes connect to the main assembly is simple but clever and very well done there. Less appealing to me is how much you can see behind the engines. In fairness, this would be reasonably difficult to close up just because there's not a whole lot of room in there. The engine exhaust assemblies are pretty standard, but one thing I'm not in love with is how they're more or less in line with the central axis of the main engine assembly. In Canon, these should be slightly in relief, more up here like that. I think you could accomplish this pretty easily with just maybe two 2x2 plates underneath to give it that extra height. And finally, moving to the cannons. 2BricksOfficial uses a very simple but effective way to construct these and get them to the proper length, and they're also very sturdy. They jiggle around a little bit, of course, if you move them, but these are not going to just fall apart. There's a representation of the spiral with the blue 1x1 round bricks here and on the opposite wing up here. And just a side note, these actually call for plain blue. I had dark blue, so I used them. And finally, flash suppressors are another area or another section of the X-Wing that a lot of people interpret in different ways. I'm pretty neutral on these. I think they're clearly too bulky, but in the absence of a better option, the shape is pretty good. And with all the X-Wings LEGO has made, it's still pretty disappointing that they haven't come up with a better piece for the flash suppressor. So now let's get to the part of this model that I think really sets it apart, and that's the S-foil mechanism. The implementation of the S-foils is really, really slick. And all you do is you press up on this 2x4 brick here to lock them open. And to close them, you press down on this assembly here. When you're building this and when you're holding the model, it's really integrated well. Like you don't have any indication that that's how you open and close them. And I discovered it by accident, kind of, which kind of made it even more fun. And there's just the right amount of resistance when you're opening this so it doesn't feel flimsy. Obviously the same if you close them. And it's also in just the right place where you can open and close the S-foils with one hand while you're swishing this around. So very cool. Furthermore, when you're constructing the mechanism, it doesn't give you any obvious indicator of how it actually works other than you've got some lift arms flapping around and some Technic connected to other Technic. So it's a lot of fun when you finally get it all together and you see it work. So there's a lot to love about this model, but in my opinion, the S-foil mechanism, it's probably worth 80 to 90% of the cost of building this alone, just so you can see how great it is. I will say, while the model looks great overall, I think the proportions are just a little bit off. This middle section of the fuselage seems a little too thick to me, both in the vertical and the horizontal orientations. In turn, I think the wings are one or two studs too short, and sorry, too narrow. If they were a little bit wider, I think they'd be more accurate. The angles on either side of the upper fuselage are really good, but the bottom in turn is just flat. And I think this is a reasonable thing to do as angling these bottom sections is fairly difficult. and it's especially difficult to accomplish while you're including everything else that the designer included. And lastly, I do think the front of this, or the front angle here is just a little bit too extreme. I think this would actually be better, and I think it is the same for the T-70, which has a shorter fuselage, and it's just the angle is straight through to the nose cone there. But for the T-65, I think this should be a little flatter uh, and not marry up as well. But overall, despite any inaccuracies, real or perceived by me, as far as scaling, this is an amazing model. It looks incredible on the shelf, and all the detailing and the asymmetry make for a really fun build, as well as something that's really fun to look at and play with. But that's not all, because there's a lot more to like about this model that will make it very attractive for a mock builder. This X-Wing uses 250 elements and 944 parts. And I'll leave out this section with stating that with zero substitutions of any kind and starting from no parts from existing inventory, the total cost for this model is about $105 from 5 to 6 stores. And that is simply crazy low, and $10 and $12 of that total is going to be for the windscreen, which you can substitute for a cheaper one. So since this is already very wallet friendly, I didn't feel the need to go as deep into part substitutions as I might otherwise, just because I didn't feel like I had to reduce the cost by very much. But there were some I noticed immediately, and like I said, the windscreen, the one specified is part 21849 PV01. It's the same mold but different detailing as many of the other X-Wing windscreens. The least expensive one currently is part 21849 PB05, which is the one you see here, and that's the one from the orange and white Poe Dameron's X-Wing, set 75273, as well as the newest Luke Skywalker's X-Wing, set 75301. If you've got the older black and orange Poe Dameron X-Wing, set 75102, or Resistance X-Wing, set 75149, or the X-Wing Starfighter from 2018, set 75218, all of those will work as well. The one from the black and white Poe Dameron X-Wing, that's the one that's actually specified here. The two 1x1 part 36840 inverted brackets in reddish brown that you use in step 14 are almost entirely hidden and can be any color. Those are used to put the red stripe on here. You can just barely see it right there. Similarly, 8 of the 10 1x2 1x2 inverted brackets, part 99780 in dark bluish gray, used in steps 11, 13, and 14 are hidden and can be any color. You can also see those barely underneath here. 4 of the 5 plate modified 1x2 with clip on top in light bluish gray are entirely hidden and can be any color, along with 4 of the 7 tile modified 1x1 with open O clip, part 15712. These are used in steps 28 and 29, and they're used to secure the side panels here. The 4 brick modified 1x4 with 4 studs on one side, part 30414 in dark bluish gray, are hidden and can be any color in step 33. The two 3x3 plates in step 51, part 11212, are completely hidden and can be any color. Those are all the way at the bottom of the fuselage there. One substitution I definitely do not recommend through personal experience. The 12 Technic Axle 2 notched part 32062 are specified in black, and black is definitely the way to go because they're very visible. So I did one half in black, you can see in here. These connect the wings to the S-foil mechanism. So black looks good, red on this side, not so much. So I would stick with black. There are 13 Technic Pin 3L with friction ridges specified in blue and 4 specified in black, part 6558. These can be mixed or matched. You can't see them. They're used to connect. They're in here. There is a Technic brick in here, and the Technic Pin 3Ls connect to that Technic brick. So either blue or black in any combination will work. Four of the 8-bar 6L with stop ring in light bluish gray, part 63965, are used to connect this engine assembly to the main engine assembly, and they're completely hidden and can be any color. And finally, the 4-plate round 1x2 with 2 open studs, part 35480, they're used to connect the engine intakes to the main section in the back here. And these are basically completely hidden. I would say they could be any color. You might want to stick with light bluish gray, dark bluish gray, or black, but any subdued or darker color will be fine. This is a fun build, and the designer did a good job keeping things interesting by varying up the subassemblies. So in general, you build from the front to the back with the wings and cannons as the last steps. And since the wings are different, it doesn't feel repetitive, and the designer even varies the order in which you put the parts common to each wing slightly, which is something I hadn't seen before. And I imagine that's an extra level of effort that wasn't necessary, but is definitely much appreciated. And what I mean by that is, for example, you see these, just take these 4 or 3 bricks here. So this 1x4 curve and these two 1x2 curves. For example, in this engine, maybe he'll have you put this one on first, followed by that one and that one. But over here, he'll have you put this one on first, and then that one and that one. So maybe some people don't like that, but I really did because I find repetitive subassemblies in official Lego sets to be the worst experience, the worst part of the experience, I should say. Each part to be added is highlighted with a red outline, and there were only two issues I had with the instructions, one minor and one more significant. The minor problem was a viewing angle in step 146. This heads to adding two 1x2 plates, but you can't see where you add the second one until 2 steps later in step 148. And the more significant problem I found was in step 262 when you attach the S-foil assembly, which is underneath this subassembly here, to the main body of the fighter. The connection is off by one 1x3 plate, and to make it work, you either need to remove the white 1x3 plate you add in step 53, or omit the light bluish gray 1x3 plate in step 237. I did research this a little bit, and it seems like others have commented about this problem on the Rebrickable comments page, and the designer said he was going to correct it. I purchased my instructions in May 2021, and the error was still there. So perhaps in the near future, future versions of the instructions will have this error remedied. And from start to finish, this build took me about 3 hours. Again, that's without sorting anything. I just dumped it into a big pile. So not too bad as far as box goes. This is a very solid model, and there aren't really any weak points that you don't expect, such as the landing gear. And speaking of the landing gear, since they unfold in opposite directions, they're surprisingly sturdy, and it's actually pretty difficult to make them collapse. So what I mean by they fold in opposite directions is that these fold out and have a hard stop like this, and the front skid folds forward and it has a hard stop right there. So you can set it down like so, and you can move it around. I'm actually pushing pretty hard on this, and it's not doing anything, and you can even kind of drag it forward back and forth like this. The only minor issue I'll mention is that the wings don't lock together. You can see there's a little gap. I will say I have not had any issues with the wings closing if they're in the open position, but this is a problem that's common to pretty much every X-Wing. It's just the weight of the bottom wings will cause them to separate a little bit. There are free instructions and a parts list available for the stand, and I do recommend the stand if you decide to build this model. If you don't care about the alliance symbol, you can just omit all the red pieces. But the stand is sturdy enough to keep it from falling over, and it puts it at a nice display angle. And it's just a studded connection in there. And you can operate the S-foils while it's on the stand. In closing, I highly recommend this model, and I tip my virtual hat to 2BricksOfficial for this one. It's a lot of fun to build, and its few, admittedly subjective flaws are almost entirely in the eyes of the beholder. With the windscreen substitution, I was getting algorithm results of 4 stores and around $98 before shipping and tax, or about $118 after shipping and tax for just the fighter. And if you include the stand, I got 4 stores and $108 before shipping and tax, which is about $128 after. To put that in perspective, it's tough to find a complete used set 75218 X-Wing these days for that price. And the sticker price for this MOC can drop even further if you've got a spares bin you can draw from. And I'll say it again, but this is really an incredible model for that price. It's fun to build, it's got a lot of features, it's got great colors, and it's really solid. The stand is useful, and I do recommend buying parts for it. Another nice thing about this model is that the parts inventory is available for free on Rebrickable, so you can go through your loose parts ahead of time before buying the instructions, which at the time of this video in June 2021, I hope, cost $8. I will link to the Rebrickable page in the comments. Thanks as always for taking the time to watch my review of the 2BricksOfficial T-65 X-Wing model. If you built this model, you have something to share that I left out, or have a question about something I didn't cover, please leave them below in the comments. Also, a big thank you for leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, or following me on Instagram. And I hope to see you back next time.